What happens when a simple farmer saves the life of a CEO's child? Well, 1 week later, 10 luxury SUVs pull up to his barn with an offer that could change his life forever. But what happens next will leave you speechless. On the surface, life on the farm was simple. The farmer, whose name was John, spent his days tending to the land, repairing fences, and caring for his animals. His small barn stood proudly on the edge of a lush field, a place where sweat, grit, and long hours of labor came together to create a life of quiet satisfaction. He had no need for luxury, no interest in wealth. His world was one of sunrises and sunsets, of honest work, and of peace that could only be found in the rhythm of nature. Across town, in a world so different from John's, lived the CEO, a man whose life was anything but simple. His mansion, surrounded by high gates and pristine lawns, stood in stark contrast to the farmer's humble abode. The CEO, named Robert, was used to a life of power, luxury, and control. He had everything most people could only dream of: wealth, status, and a thriving business empire. His family, including his young son, Alex, was his pride and joy. But on that fateful day, that world of wealth and privilege would collide with the world of the farmer in the most unexpected way. It was a perfect summer afternoon when the unthinkable happened. Robert, the CEO, had taken his family to the nearby lake, a serene spot that offered the peace and privacy his wealth could afford. His young son Alex, full of energy and curiosity, ran toward the water's edge. He was a strong swimmer for his age, but even the most skilled can be caught off guard in an instant. Without warning, Alex misjudged a step, his foot slipping on a slick rock. In a heartbeat, he plunged into the deep, murky water. Panic swept over Robert and his wife. The water was cold and fast-moving. They screamed for help, but the lake was remote, far from any lifeguards or bystanders. Robert's mind raced, but his body was frozen in terror. He knew he couldn't swim well enough to save his son, but he dove into the water anyway, desperate. The current was strong, and Alex was nowhere to be seen. It was then, out of nowhere, that a figure appeared. John, the farmer, had been working nearby, his tractor rumbling across the field. Hearing the cries, he immediately dropped his tools and sprinted toward the water. He had no hesitation, no second thoughts. Without a moment to lose, he plunged into the lake, his strong arms cutting through the water like a man who had done this 1,000 times before. He grabbed Alex, pulling the struggling child toward safety with everything he had. The moment John dragged Alex to the shore, a heavy silence fell over the scene. For a heartbeat, it seemed like everything was frozen in time. Then Robert's voice broke the stillness as he knelt beside his son, pulling him into his arms, tears streaming down his face. "You're safe now," he whispered over and over. The relief was palpable, but so was the overwhelming gratitude. The family's nightmare had ended, and it was thanks to the quick actions of a man who had no reason to get involved, other than his basic humanity. Robert stood up, his hands trembling. He looked at John, whose face remained calm despite the chaos that had just unfolded. "Thank you," Robert managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my son's life." Word began to spread quickly in the small town. People spoke in hushed tones about the farmer who had risked his life for a child he didn't know. The local news picked up the story, and before long, the tale of the farmer's heroism had traveled far beyond the quiet town. But for John, it was simply another day. No fanfare, no applause. Just a life lived as it always had been. Except now, his act of kindness had captured the world's attention. 1 week after the rescue, something unimaginable happened. John had just finished a long day of work, his muscles sore from hours of hauling hay and mending fences. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the field, he heard a sound, an unfamiliar hum. At first it was distant, but soon it grew louder. His heart skipped a beat as the rumbling of engines reached his ears. Turning toward the road, he saw them, a line of 10 luxury SUVs, their polished chrome gleaming in the fading light. The convoy rolled to a stop at the edge of his farm, dust swirling in the wake of their arrival. John's mind raced. Who were these people? And why were they here? The doors of the SUVs opened, and out stepped Robert, the CEO, followed by a small entourage of well-dressed individuals. They were nothing like the people John was used to seeing. The CEO walked toward him, a look of determination in his eyes. As he reached John, he stopped and extended his hand. "John," Robert said, his voice firm but filled with gratitude, "I owe you everything. I know you didn't do this for anything in return, but I can't let your kindness go unrecognized." John stood there confused, unsure of what was happening. Then Robert gestured toward the fleet of SUVs. "I want to offer you something, anything you need." John stood there, his mind spinning, unable to fully process what was happening. A man who spent his days surrounded by the simplicity of nature was now being offered something he could never have imagined: wealth, luxury, and a life far removed from the land he loved. Robert was staring at him with genuine expectation, the fleet of luxury SUVs behind him, a stark reminder of the world John had no interest in. "Anything you need," Robert repeated, his tone filled with sincerity. "Money? A new house? A partnership with my company? Name it." John's eyes flicked to the ground, his thoughts racing. He had always believed that happiness didn't come from things, money, cars, or mansions. It came from hard work, family, and the satisfaction of a job well done. But here, in front of him, was an opportunity that could change everything. His heart beat faster as the weight of the decision settled on his shoulders. Should he accept the offer and step into a world that promised security and comfort? Or should he stay true to the life he knew, the life that, despite its simplicity, had given him more peace than any luxury could provide? After what seemed like an eternity, John took a deep breath, looking Robert in the eye. "I appreciate the offer, but no. I'm happy here. This is my life." As the SUV slowly turned around and drove away, John stood at the edge of his farm, the weight of the moment still heavy on his shoulders. He hadn't chosen wealth or fame, but he had chosen something far more valuable: his integrity, his peace, and his simple life. The world may have seen him as a hero, but to John, he was just a man who did what needed to be done. And in the end, that was enough. Sometimes the greatest treasures aren't measured in luxury, but in the quiet satisfaction of staying true to oneself.